Tonight, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Lawyers, one of the protest organizers, Take It Back movements, appeals to protesters to stay off the streets, says it is time for dialogue. Tonight, our focus is on calming the hunger storm ravaging the country as the nationwide protests hit day 2. Our guest tonight are Professor Agwomadaki, Professor of International Humanitarian Law, and Jacob Hele, a policy development analyst. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now let's begin with some developments in the polity. Senior advocate of Nigeria and lawyer of one of the groups organizing the nationwide protest, Ebun Olu Adegboruwa, has called for an immediate suspension of protest, saying it's time to dialogue with government as sponsored agents have infiltrated the ranks of the protesters to derail their laudable mission. In a statement released today, Mr. Adegboruwa expressed sympathy for the losses incurred during the protest, including the death of security personnel and protesters and property damage. He commended the protesters for their peaceful conduct in various locations across the country. However, he emphasized the need for dialogue, criticizing the government for ignoring the protesters' demands and failing to engage with them. He called on President Bola Tinubu to directly address the nation and engage with the protesters' representatives. Mr. Adegboruwa urged the protesters to suspend their actions and give room for meaningful dialogue, warning that the protest had been hijacked by fifth columnists, leading to further losses and casualties. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, says the military will do everything possible to protect the peace in the country and ensure protests across some states in Nigeria do not degenerate into anarchy. General Musa said this earlier today in a press conference. He said if the police cannot handle the security situation, military troops will be deployed to assist them.
We realize that this destruction we're doing, monies have to be used. Monies for development will have to be used to repair this thing so that we can move forward. And so instead of doing that, we should come together, make sure nothing is destroyed. The statement, the message has already been passed to the federal government, the state government, and the local government. Armed forces and the entire military security agencies will not stand by and see that to continue. So we want to warn those that are recalcitrant, those that don't want to listen, that will not fold our hands and see our country to be destroyed. We will take action, and the action we'll take it professionally. Anyone that is caught will be taken to the courts to be dealt with. It's important for them to understand that working together as a team is what we require. The security forces cannot do it alone. We need all Nigerians to put hands together to make sure we succeed. And we stop these criminals from taking advantage.
The pro-Tinubu and Take It Back hunger protesters in Adamawa State have agreed with security operatives to step down so as to avoid being hijacked by thugs. The protesters acknowledged that much has been done by the president and Governor Fintiri to make the state and the country a better place. Senior reporter Owolabia Denusi found in this report.
Protesters in Adamawa State have reached an agreement with security operatives to end the ongoing hunger protest. The pro-Tinubu protesters were out to lend their voices on national issues bothering citizens. The protesters used the occasion to highlight the achievement of President Tinubu and Governor Fintiri's administration in the last 1 year.
I'm a president of the Commodity Association, one of the Commodity Association of Nigeria, that's agri-commodities. I know what the government is doing. This government has distributed a fertilizer free of charge to 36 state governors. Most of the members of the National Assembly also was given fertilizer to give out free to our farmers. So we know all these things that is taking place now in this country is political.
Yesterday we were out to address the issues of what is happening in the country, and today we deem it fit to come back again. Adamawa State is one of the states that experienced peace and harmony yesterday, and we see the development strides of the president and the governor of the state together.
Addressing the protesters, the State Commissioner of Police, appreciated the peaceful manner in which protesters conducted themselves as he urged them to suspend the protests.
The command is appealing to members of the public, particularly parents, to talk to their subjects. We don't want what happened in other states to happen in Adamawa State. We are known to be peace-loving people in Adamawa State. We are known to be professionals, security agencies. So in that, we should not allow miscreants to hijack this process. Instead, it should go the way it is going.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, it will be time to discuss the day 2 of the nationwide protest with focus on calming the hunger storm in the country. And I will be speaking with Professor Agbo Madaki, Professor of International Humanitarian Law, and Dr. J.K. Pede is a policy development analyst. Please stay with us, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Today, the hashtag hardship protest entered its second day as demonstrators continue their protest against hunger and economic hardship. On Thursday, when the peaceful demonstration began, TVC reported of how the protest gradually turned violent in states like Kano, Gombe, Yobe, and other states. In all of these, protests were not recorded in some states like Ekiti and most of the southeastern states of the country. Meanwhile, several properties were destroyed and businesses grounded in states where the protest turned violent on Thursday. Tonight, let's get the perspective of Professor Agbo Madaki, who is a professor of international humanitarian law, and Dr. J.K. Pede, a policy development analyst. Dr. Jake, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight. Dr. Pele, can you hear me? Good evening to you. All right.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Right, good evening. Professor Madaki, good evening to you, sir. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening.
Right. So it's the second day of the hashtag nationwide protest. Prof, let me start with you. What is your impression about these 2 days? Did it go as you envisaged? How do you assess the way security agencies have handled protesters? Was it professional enough in your submission? Was it engaging? Were there loopholes you think the agencies should work on?
Well, usually a social protest of this kind is more or less an ill wind that blows no one no good. Even though the organizers of the protest had given, notice to the world at large, and I believe it is within the constitutional rights of citizens to agitate, to advocate, and to press for reforms or changes within the system. If you ask me, by and large, the government of the day must be given kudos for the way and manner these protests have been handled or managed. As a matter of fact, we saw across the states, in Plateau State and a few other states, that the police and the security apparatus were literally working hand in glove with the protesters. And in a lot of states, it went very, very peaceful. Also, in states where the protesters or where the protests got hijacked by hoodlums and street urchins, whereas I do believe that government have the capacity to have visited the route of the law, as allowed under the rules of engagement to handle the situation where there were lootings and unnecessary destruction of government properties. I think the security agencies intentionally held back from exercising the right vested on them by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I know very well that Section 33 deals with the right to life, and yet under that very section, there is derogation that in the event of suppressing a riot, or insurrection, that a life may be taken. But you will agree with me, considering the wanton destruction of properties, especially in Kano State, in Kaduna State, in Jigawa, and a few northern states, and the way and manner the security agencies handled it. If you ask me, and to be fair, and I'm old enough to also state that I think the security agencies deserve some pats on their backs. Thank you very much.
Prof, based on what we saw yesterday, the IGP and the defense chief have both issued stern warnings to troublemakers. How instructive are these warnings, and how far do you think these warnings will go in taming these hoodlums?
Well, you agree with me that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria has distributed powers to the armed forces, to the police, that of Police Section 214 of the Constitution, and then strengthened by the Police Act. And if you look at it, it is the primary responsibility of the police to protect lives and property and to ensure that Nigerian citizens have right of passage on the highways, on the streets, and the roads. So, with a review and the benefit of hindsight of what happened, particularly yesterday, I think the warning by the Inspector General of the Police and the Chief of Army Staff is timely and sufficient, and I do believe that those who are on the streets, they are neither deaf nor dumb, with all due respect, and I expect them to heed the warning in order to avoid circumstances that may be unpalatable and unpleasant, as the case may be.
All right. I'll come back to you, Prof. Dr. Pele, while I get your assessment of day 1 and 2 of this protest, Kano State, Yobe, Nasarawa, and Katsina have all, these governors in total have declared dusk to dawn curfew in their states. Do you see the list expanding?
Well, okay, I think it's important to underscore and underpin one very vital issues around this protest is the fact that the protest itself has emerged as a powerful voice against systemic issues within the governance structure. There's no doubt about that. I think what we should be talking about now is how do we calm the nerves of these protesters? How do we bring about peace? What do we do to ensure that the protesters will go back to their various homes and allow government to repair the damages that have been done while government listens to the agitation? There is no doubt that they have the legitimate right to protest, but protesting for whatever agitation comes with responsibility. And there's always there's this saying that freedom is not really free. Freedom comes with responsibility. And so what we should be talking about now is how do we provide a roadmap for a sustainable change? What will government be doing right now to ensure that they carry along the agitations of the protesters, while the protesters also should know that they have a responsibility of themselves in the most honorable manner. Back to your question, Moke, the situation in the north in particular comes with a lot of a mixed bag of feelings. There's no doubt that there are some politicians that are taking advantage of what is happening, especially in the north, because the intensity and the damage and the colossal loss of life and property in the north is alarming, and it calls for concern. So I think the protesters need to understand that they have made and sounded the alarm. Government have heard them. The international community have heard them. I think this is the time to now sit down and discuss, have a discussion, engagement, and I can provide some solutions in the course of the program. But this is the time for all nerves to calm, and let's find a lasting solution.
All right.
Every time there's issues like this, it costs very huge penalties. Lives have been lost, properties have been damaged. You know, it's time to move forward and move forward in the most peaceful manner.
You know, we'll get to these issues and solutions in a minute. But Dr. Pele, let me stay with you because you're one of the critical stakeholders who have said to me on this program that the president met a badly battered economy and it would take a while for the Nigerian economy to stabilize. So do you sincerely think that, if only the Tinubu administration had been vocal and open to Nigerians about what they met on ground, about how bad the economy was before May 29, perhaps Nigerians would have understood where we were as a nation, where we are at the moment, and the impact of what the president had done in the last 1 year.
Okay, did you see me clapping for you? I was just discussing with a friend of, I'm telling you, I was just discussing this with a friend of mine a minute before I came on air. And I don't understand why the Tinubu administration and the communicators around him are not willing to accept the truth. Why do they live in denial? They inherited a fledgling, a dying, an economy that is in comatose. And why is it that they didn't admit that and communicate exactly what the issues are? Yes, I agree. It's the same political party. They want to protect the APC and all that. There's no doubt about that. But it's not paying out. They need to come out and let the public know. We all know, though, that they inherited an economy that is so battered, and that it's going to take time to repair it. There is no need trying to admit the obvious. Living in denial is one of the problems that this government have inherited, and they just need to come to terms with the truth. The truth is the kind of economy that Tinubu administration inherited will take years to repair. They inherited a bunch of corrupt, systemic issues, and they need to admit that. That is the fallout of what he's experiencing now. He may not admit it himself, but his surrogates need to admit it, that this economy was dead, and they are trying to do everything possible to revive it, and that's the truth.
All right. But what difference would that have made, Dr. Pele? What difference would that have made?
It would have made a lot of difference. The Nigerians, the situation in our hands, the Nigerians would have come to terms with the fact that, hey, these people are struggling to revive what have been totally damaged by the past administration.
All right.
That's the truth.
All right.
It would have been obvious that there were people who were bent on ensuring that they will leave the economy of this country totally irreparable.
All right, Prof, let me come to you. Prof, let me come to you, and I want you to speak to this matter. Major stakeholders say over the years we have been living a fake life, and the president is just about fixing the root causes of some of our deep-rooted challenges as a nation. And they say this resistance and impatience is why successive governments chose to window dress most of our issues rather than addressing it. And that maybe Mr. President should backtrack on some of these policies. I mean, as it is now, are we ripe for true development?
My own perspective to the issue at stake is the fact that prior to 2023, when this present government came into power, the average Nigerian will know that something obviously was wrong with the national economy. There's no doubt about it. If you notice, in 2015, the twilight of the Goodluck Jonathan administration, Nigerians were so agitated, exasperated, frustrated, and they knew that there was the need for a change, and everybody thought that Buhari was the much-needed Messiah. And no wonder when President Buhari came, Nigerians sang one alarm song and felt that Hosanna in the highest, that the Messiah had come. Unfortunately, the 8 years of President Muhammad Buhari's regime did not help matter. Rather, it took us even much backward than the situation we were before he came to power. And I see this present government as one government that actually came with a proper diagnosis of what the national malaise was. And once you've done a thorough diagnosis of any medical challenge, the next issue is that of the prognosis. And the prognosis this government was faced, as in any medical issues, is either to adopt or prescribe medicinal approach or go for invasive surgery, as the case may be. And you agree with me that invasive surgeries oftentimes may be much more painful, but could put an end to the situation. What has happened in this case, for instance, on the 29th of May in 2023, when the government removed the petroleum subsidy, it was one decision that must be taken. Whether it was taken at the right time or not is moot point. Previous governments were afraid of taking that decision, and this government did. And like any surgical operation, people are bound to feel the pain. Like my brother Pele just pointed out recently in this conversation, my own observation is that before you carry out any medical procedure, you must explain to the patients the implications, the options, the alternative, and the person must be convinced that this is for my own good. And the patient must be seen to have understood what we're explaining, and that is why it is called informed consent. And then to that extent, I think probably Nigerians were not so properly informed. And then I think at that material time is the handlers of Mr. President. Otherwise, I believe that that decision was taken in good faith. Now, 1 year down the line, this government have treaded where angels will fear to touch. But I do believe that in the final analysis, and I think most people are in agreement with me, that it is in the best interest of our nation, because we cannot continue like this. But however, having said so, you know, in so far as it affects the cost of living, and people are beginning to experience what I may call excruciating poverty, there won't be anything wrong for this present government, as it is likely to do or want to do, is to holistically review the economic policies that have been implemented so far and see methods that can be adopted to make life more meaningful for Nigerians. And I tell you, the biggest challenge, just a minute, man, the biggest challenge to food insecurity or security in this country is not the present economic policy, but that of insecurity all over the country. Once Mr. President can rail in on insecurity all over the countries and farmers can return to their farms, I think I tell you prices of foodstuff will come down and life may be more in abundance once more.
All right, we'll get to the matter of food security in a moment. But Dr. Pele, let me quickly ask you the same question, but flip it in some other way. So do you think as a nation we are really ready for the kind of development or progress Mr. President thinks Nigerians deserve? I'm asking because the economists say great policies so far. But with this reaction we've seen, do you think the president needs to adjust his approach? And if so, I want you to be very precise and very specific with those policies you think Mr. President has to reverse.
There are a number of policies that he has introduced that, you know, if I was in his communication team, I will forewarn Nigerians. Policies, the physical policies, the policies on social development, those are not policies that gives results overnight. It gives results over time. And that should be communicated. That should have been communicated. You know, Nigerians are very patient people. And so if you roll out a policy that will require long-term implementation to give the expected result, you need to communicate that. The idea that things are going to happen overnight, you know, it's not for the kind of audience that we have called Nigerian, you know. So the problem is not that most of his policies are bad. The problem is that there's no proper communication of timeline where these policies will yield the expected result. You know, I keep saying it. I keep saying it that this president means well, but you can mean well, and if you're not able to communicate the wellness that you mean, it will turn ugly. And as such, you know, I expect proper interrogation of policy, proper communication of policy, proper briefing of who will implement the policies. And we go back to the same thing we said before without sounding repetitive. You know, there is no doubt, Prof was talking about, you know, this government inherited a dead economy. And to revive a dead person, you need to go more than the extra mile. And part of the strategy will be to effectively communicate that. There's nothing wrong with trying to say, look, listen, I inherited a bad economy. And we shouldn't politicize that, you know. And this is what this president has been struggling with, and it needs to be communicated.
All right. Gentlemen, let's talk about the issues, because many say food inflation, which is the elephant in the room, is the only metric that affects about 99% of the Nigerian population directly. And I know that in addressing food insecurity, recently the federal government announced about 6 strategies in total. First is the 150-day duty-free import window for food commodities, and that covers suspension of duties, tariffs, and taxes for the importation of certain food commodities through land and sea borders, as well as imported food commodities will be subjected to a recommended retail price. Prof, let me start with you. First, does this demonstrate a clear understanding of the complex matters on ground?
I think the recent approach of governments is probably from the humanitarian angle or perspective, as the case may be. But we should be looking at the long-term solution, because when you open the window for importation of foods and food products, the case may be.
Kindly hold on, sir. Kindly hold. Did you say we should be looking at long-term measures?
Yes. I said we should be looking more at long-term measures. You know, because for any country to throw the ball.
If you're being realistic, Prof, I mean, the protest out there is because the government all of the efforts of the federal government has been geared towards long-term solutions. But Nigerians are saying we want short-term measures.
If only you allow me to make my point.
All right,
If
Prof.
only you allow me to make my point. Because when your children are hungry, and then probably just maybe you go to your neighbors to borrow food to feed, the kids are going to be hungry still. Do not forget that whatever we are importing, we are using hard-in forest or dipping into our forest reserve, as the case may be. Nigeria has the capacity, both human, material, and the land resources, for us not only to feed ourselves, but to be major exporter of food products all over the world. And I can tell you that the main challenge, more than anything else, it is banditry, kidnapping, and insecurity, especially in northern Nigeria, you know, which ordinarily would have been the food basket of the country. So I do believe that with the support of the armed forces and with the support of all Nigeria, we can rein in on this issue of insecurity. And our farmers, I'm from Benue State, and I know how much virtually all Benue citizens are involved in farming. Government is involved in farming. But right now, our farms in the rural area are no-go area. So once we can rein in on the issue of insecurity, I do believe that the common economics will prevail, that there will be fewer money chasing more. Once there's enough food in the market, the price will come down. There was a time in Benue State that a whole basket of tomato was basically less than 200 naira because there were no buyers. We were producing more tomatoes, more okra, and more foodstuff than buyers, and so the prices were seemingly very low. And I believe we can return to that state again. So my advice for Mr. President, and I know he takes this very seriously, that we should rein in on the issue of insecurity. In the interim, we can allow, importation of certain food items, okay, to make sure that the food is available. But the next issue, what of the purchasing power of the ordinary Nigerian citizens? So if we begin to produce what we eat, I think the economy will improve very greatly because we're going to conserve scarce foreign reserve that is going to be used in the importation of needed foodstuff.
All right, let me stay with you, Prof. I mean, in assessing how the president has fared in the last 1 year when it comes to matter of insecurity, what more do you think the president can do to secure the nation?
Well, let me speak from the legal perspective. We have in this country the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and 2013 and all other laws enabling the president in that behalf. And the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I do believe that since he came into power, the service chiefs are doing a yeoman job, and they have been doing very, very well. And I think is that in the military, I think more than ever, what they need is more firepower, deployment of kinetic power, as the case may be, and then to rein in on these people. If you notice in the Northeast, especially in Borno State. I am told from record available that a lot of displaced persons are beginning to return to their ancestral home and then resuming agricultural activities, as the case may be. And if you put them on a scale, the level of insecurity by way of terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, I think substantially have reduced within the last 1 year. But I do believe that Mr. President can do more so that the issue of food challenges or food insecurity can become a thing of the past as it were before.
All right, gentlemen, let's take a break, and when we come back, we will continue this conversation. Please stay with us, everyone. Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. And I've been speaking with Professor Akpo Madaki. He is a professor of international humanitarian law, and Dr. J.K. Pele, who is a policy development analyst. And tonight's our focus is on calming the hunger storm ravaging the country as the nationwide protest enters day 2. Gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Dr. Pele, let me come to you. Before we went on break, Prof says the major problem facing food prices, herders, farmers clashes and insecurity, and that no matter what we do, if these two problems still exist, food scarcity will continue. How far, or how would you say the president has fared in securing the nation?
Well, let me weigh in on the measure, the policy on food importation. I think it's a very laudable policy. However, I think the framers of that policy probably forgot the fact that they were framing a policy for a typical Nigerian situation. Many people in the private sector, many importers, there are many of them. There are very few honest ones, but most of them are very dishonest. And so no matter what you do, one, they will import and still sell the price that they want to sell. So being able to regulate the pricing of what you have given them free importation, will be a Herculean task. It'll be difficult, making sure that they import the quality of food that is consumable is another thing. Ensuring that they even do what is needed in implementing that policy is another Herculean task. So while Prof is right with the issue of insecurity and all that, the issue of corruption, which is one of the root causes of this protest, is also something that should have been taken into consideration. Who are those that will do this, that will import the food item? What kind of food item? Where would this food item come from? When will it arrive? How will it be distributed? The pricing control and regulation, how will that be implemented? And so on and so forth. So it's a good idea that requires a thoughtful and careful implementation strategy. But as much as we want to look at all of this, I'm interested for us to look at what are the strategies that will bring this calm that we are all here tonight talking about. What is it that government should do to activate the interest of the protesters to go back to their homes so that the government will begin to implement what they have been agitating for? At the appropriate time, I would like to discuss those strategies. But a good idea, and many good ideas that the president has, but sometimes the Nigerian factor comes in and is not...
Dr. Pele, so what are the strategies you're talking about?
Well, I think the first thing first, for me, the first thing first, when it comes to the strategy for the government to bring calm to the situation, number one would be Number one would be dialogue and engagement. Dialogue and engagement. Government needs to create a window for open and transparent dialogue with protesters, especially their leaders and critical stakeholders. Now, what will that do? It will instill trust. It will show that government have an understanding of their grievances and, of course, collaboratively develop a solution.
All right.
Government needs attention to that. There are issues like policy reforms. We'll come to that. Public communication is also important. Institutional strengthening is important, and so on and so forth.
All right. Dr. Pella, I'll come back to you. Prof, let me get your perspectives on this.
Yes,
protesters are demanding that petrol pump price goes back to 100 naira per litre. Oil and gas experts say that request is unrealistic because it cannot happen. But in the course of the week, the federal government made 4 key decisions regarding domestic refineries. Approval of 450,000 barrels per day for domestic refineries, mandated payments in naira for crude oil purchases, introduced a subsidy for local oil operators to reduce inflation, allowed Dangote refinery to buy crude oil in nairas. Do these decisions guarantee the stability of the pump price of refined fuel?
When I was teaching communication skill to legislators, I made it very clear that if I am talking to you and you apparently don't understand what I'm saying, it's like a man winking at a lady in the dark. Only you know what you are doing because the lady will not know that you are winking at her. If you ask me, it is completely impractical, very unrealistic, to take the pump price back to 100 naira. It is not sustainable, not even for a week. And you will realize that on the 29th of May, when Mr. President removed the subsidy, Nigeria did not go to the street. It's more like, let's wait and see. And I tell you, it's simply because of the skyrocketing prices of foodstuff. That is why Nigerians are on the street. We used to have about 5 refineries. Billions have been spent on total maintenance turnaround without achieving any result. Now we have these situations that we have a local refinery or privately owned refinery, popular among them Dangote and 1, 2, 3 others. And then the issue on the burner before now is the non-availability of the crude to be supplied to these private refineries. And regardless of political persuasion, if I heard right that recently Mr. President ordered the Nigerian National Oil Company, I think NNPC as it is called, to release about 450,000 barrels per day to this private refinery. And I think if this instruction is complied with, and above all, Mr. President also directed that the sales of this crude be denominated in naira and not dollar. So that reduces the pressure and the stress, on our naira. The naira obviously will pick up. And I think if they go on stream and we are now producing locally and supplying locally, there's no way that the simple law of supply and demand will not bring down the cost of petroleum product. And if that be the case, there will be a general multiplier effect or rippling effect on the economy. And I see prices of goods and services also coming down. I think what the government of the day need is the understanding and the support of all Nigerians. But the biggest challenge we face is the inability of the ordinary Nigerians on the street to understand simple economics as the case may be. And that is where our legislators or elected representative comes in. We have 774 local governments in Nigeria. In each of these local governments have nothing less than 10 councillors as the case may be. So if they decide to go to the grassroots and explain government policies or policy issues to the grassroots as the case may be, I think there will be greater intercourse between the government and the people, and there will be a better relationship between the government and the people as the case may be. The people ought to know, and they have a right to know, what the government of the day or government at all tiers are doing. And I believe if they know, they can key into it and give the government the benefit of the doubt. And in due season, we'll reap the reward.
All right. Dr. Pelle, so still talking about this latest decisions by the federal government, how much impact do you think this will have on the oil and gas sector?
Well, like Prof rightly said, I am an advocate for subsidy removal. you know. And of course, the demand of taking back the pump price to 100 naira is grossly unrealistic, and it's not going to happen, because that will further cripple the fledgling economy. You know, I think that's not the way to go. For me, I keep going back to what we need to do to stop this protest and to chart a new way forward. As a policy development person and analyst, and you know, I would sit back, asking the president to get some policy experts, let them sit down and take into consideration the demands, you know, the 10 points demand and several other demands from the generality of Nigerians, and put them into a policy document that will begin to show intention to address the issues and the root cause of this.
But Dr. Pele, I mean, we have to be mindful of the fact that, I mean, some of these demands are quite unrealistic, just as Prof has said.
Well, the point is, you need to sit down and talk with the people who are proposing this, and give them reason why you think their demands are unrealistic. You know, so until you sit down, when you make policies, policies are not individualized documents. Policies are government documents, but they are government documents that all critical stakeholders have bought into an ideology that is put in thematic context and then documented with a work plan for implementation. You know, so when that is done, they themselves will sit down there and agree within themselves that this thing is not realistic.
All right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Pele.
The thing is unrealistic.
All right, Prof, we're winding down. But one thing Arewa Consultative Forum acknowledges as part of the challenges we have as a nation, which Mr. President must address, is the insensitive lifestyles and attitudes of Nigeria's elected representatives and other public officials, which has resulted in this widespread anger for ordinary citizens. I mean, you hear some of these protesters say, pay Nigerian workers the specific amount you're paying your ministers. So this is otherwise a reiteration of the call for us to cut the cost of governance. Where does government start from, Prof?
First and foremost, I think there must be greater transparency within the government. For instance, the average Nigerian, and I don't know how much a minister earns, I actually don't know what legislators are earning or the people who have been elected into power. And this is where the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Committee comes in, and then the Salaries and Wages Commission comes in. I think it's time Nigeria knew exactly what the elected officials or those holding positions of trust are earning. So long as this is not made public, it will give room for rumor peddling and as the case may be. But I remember long ago under the military regime in 1995, a minister's salary was not even up to 50,000. So the issue of lifestyle, whatever we advise Nigerians, all of us must act as the ombudsman. Corruption is not to be fought by government alone, but it's a duty incumbent upon all citizens. So if you think anybody elected is living above his or her means, that is why we have the Code of Conduct Bureau. Under the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, anybody elected, anybody appointed to a public position is supposed to declare their assets. And once this assets is declared and you believe that somebody is now living over and above their means, it behoves on Nigerians to either write petition to the Code of Conduct Bureau, and ultimately they can get prosecuted before the Code of Conduct Tribunal. Also, we have the Freedom of Information Act, which allows Nigeria to write and demand for information from anybody holding position of trust or public position or public office, as the case may be. I think the biggest challenge we have in the present polity is that of ignorance. I know ignorance oftentimes can be occasioned by poverty, and poverty can be occasioned by illiteracy. So I think the more Nigerians know the powers they have in their hand, the more they can demand for accountability. from those that are in public office. And I will also advise the present government to strengthen the anti-corruption institution, like ICPC, EFCC, and even the judiciary, as the case may be, so that all cases, proven cases of corruption, can be prosecuted. And I think once people are prosecuted and convicted, it will serve as a deterrent to others. And then for those who are holding positions of trust, that are rubbing salt on injury by their very flamboyant lifestyle, I think the chicken has come home to roost.
All right.
You either ship in now or you ship out, because such people are nothing but embarrassment
before I get
to
back
the present
to
government.
Dr. Pele. It's day 2 of the protest, though Mr. Adegboruwa has urged the protesters to suspend their actions and give room for meaningful dialogue. But overall, in what ways do you think the Tinubu administration can continue to mitigate this hardship? Because the truth is, majority of Nigerians are not having it easy.
By communicating their plans. And that brings me to something that I want to talk about, Jumoke. There's something that this government tested and it worked for them, even within the confines of this protest, which the government of Goodluck Jonathan never did. Because the protest of Goodluck Jonathan's administration, the protest that happened there, was far worse than what is happening right now. What is it that this government tried to do, although it came too little, too late? Public communication. Public communication. For the first time, the government went on the media advertising what they've done, calming the nerves of citizens, asking them not to give the government the opportunity, telling them that they have a right to protest, but they need to do it in such a manner that it doesn't become a public nuisance. Fantastic strategy, but it came too late. The protesters also employed this strategy. They went on intensive public communication. They were on social media. They occupied the social media. They don't have the resources the government has. The government have all the resources to get on the social media, and occupy the public communication space. They didn't do that much of that. Now, going forward, they need to do that. They shouldn't rest on their oars.
All right, Dr. Pele.
Continue to communicate. People like you are bringing guests to talk about this.
All right, Dr. Pele, thank you. We're out of time. Sadly, we're out of time, but I get your point. The Tinubu administration will speak more and continue to communicate with the Nigerians. All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I've been speaking with Professor Agbon Madaki, is a professor of international humanitarian law, and Dr. J.K. Pele, a policy development analyst. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you for your insights on the program tonight. Thank you for watching, everyone. I will thank you. And thank you for watching, everyone. It marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone, and have a great weekend.